The media is being more transparent on ever on what the new attack line is going to be on Conservative Party leader Pierre Poilievre. Right now, the sort of smaller fringe left-wing websites are preparing the attacks that the legacy media will soon take on and then be able to go after Pierre Poilievre on, pretending that this is a big controversy because a bunch of far-left websites said it was a controversy. So right now, the website PressProgress, such a vaunted website run by open communists, is going after Poilievre because he openly stated in a rally at Richmond Hill in Ontario that he is against gender ideology in schools and thinks that children should not have it being pushed on them in the classroom. A eminently reasonable position. 80% of parents or just 80% of Canadians, I guess, are on board with parental rights. And parental rights, the movement is predicated on the fact that most parents are not comfortable with their kids being taught gender theory or being pushed on them in the classroom. And then if a child is convinced that they should maybe identify as a different gender or something like non-binary, that the parent is not allowed to know if the person, their child, is identifying that way in the classroom. It's obviously a violation of the sort of relationship between a parent and the child to have secrets being kept from them in the classroom, where basically the teacher is acting almost as a co-parent along with the real parents. That's deeply inappropriate, and Pierre Poilievre is taking a very reasonable position by opposing this stuff. But if you work for somewhere like PressProgress, an organization that has writers who still work there who openly say that we shouldn't, or they were retweeting stuff saying we shouldn't celebrate Remembrance Day and instead we should be celebrating the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, these people think this is very bigoted, homophobic, and transphobic. Why? Well, it's because Pierre Poilievre simply opposes far left ideology being placed onto children. And make no mistake, it's not because he said anything bad about transgender people or gay people. Obviously, Pierre Poilievre's never said anything close to that. They're merely saying that you're bigoted because you don't give in fully to our fringe beliefs. That is complete nonsense, and I think Pierre Poilievre's going to win this round. But this is exactly how the media cycle works. I want to bring it up. I'll share my screen here for just a second to go over the PressProgress article, but this is how they do stuff. They will print an article at a weird fringe website like PressProgress or antihate.net or anything like that, and then they will use that reporting by people who are obviously very left-wing ideologically. They quote their own left-wing sources saying that Pierre Poilievre is rude or bigoted or mean because he opposes something that most Canadians oppose. And then the CBC, CTV, Global, they'll eventually pick it up and say, there's so many people mad at Pierre Poilievre's recent comments about gender ideology, even though you cannot find anyone actually online who's outraged who aren't just in the far left orbit of PressProgress, antihate.com, and like the Walrus or whatever. But this is the article, and it says analysis, and it reads, Pierre Poilievre under fire after video surfaces of homophobic and transphobic speech. And already, this is complete nonsense. They're making it sound like this was a secret videotape that Pierre Poilievre didn't want you to see. It was from the Western Standard, who uploaded it themselves. They commented on his speech, basically saying that it's good that he is actually taking it to the gender ideology left, and that everyone at the event, and even the Conservative Party spokespeople, they didn't apologize for it. They basically said, yeah, he said what he said, and we stand by it. But PressProgress is trying to drum up this idea that there's all these angry people out there, and are you going to be one of the good people who's angry at Pierre Poilievre for saying something that's vaguely bigoted, even though we can't prove it is in any way? This is exactly their game. It's just to create faux outrage that then the mainstream media, because a bunch of left-wing outlets said that there was, they can now say there's a bunch of sources out there saying that people are mad at Pierre Poilievre, and they're never going to find more than just activists to say that they are. Whenever the media says there's outrage about something, it's like 5 people. Nobody cares. Didn't see this video trending on Twitter. I did not see the PressProgress stories trending. I eventually found them because I Google people's names in politics just to see what's up with different people. Nobody was covering this. Even PressProgress, you have to be really specific with the wording on Google to make them even appear in Google News. Nobody cares about this story whatsoever. And Pierre Poilievre, again, is 100% on the side of both families and just basic liberty. Whenever people bring up and their opposition to parental rights, it's always either based on one or two things: crazy hypotheticals that obviously do not commonly happen, or just the sort of idea that there's fake rights that are being infringed upon. So you get a lot of these people saying, well, it's violating the privacy rights of a child not to be able to keep secrets with a teacher about how they're identifying the classroom, or it's somehow violating the sanctity of the classroom for parents to be able to inquire about what is in lesson plans, what's in the curriculum being taught, and somehow that's deeply wrong. And the same people will say, well, you can just look up what's in the curriculum. Like, well, obviously each teacher has a different lesson plan. And as soon as you bring up that, even though they'll smugly say, well, you can just look up what they're teaching, they'll immediately say, well, you're not allowed to know what they're teaching because that's intrusive and it's sort of breathing down the neck of a teacher. And like, it's obviously not. And the vast, vast majority of teachers do not teach gender ideology in the classroom. The problem is there's a lot of leeway being given because of the lack of transparency that a teacher who subscribes to that ideology can push it subtly in the classroom or very openly. And unless a child tells their parent, it's just never going to get out there. And the second thing they do when I say the crazy hypotheticals, and I've even heard this from people who are supposedly conservative, very small group of people in Canada who believe this, but they'll say that, well, parental rights is a dog whistle for people wanting to harm or oppress gay kids or something like that, or trans kids. Obviously, that's not it. It's a fringe hypothetical saying that someone could get harmed if a parent is informed of what's going on in the classroom. Now, what do you think is the worst modus operandi going on here? That parents should, when they drop off their kids, the shutters come down around the schools and they're not allowed to know what's going on? Or is it that parents, there's a 1 in a million chance that a parent is going to be deeply like mean and hurtful to a child who's gay or something like that? Obviously, that is not a scenario that commonly happens, and there's already laws to prevent that. If you are abusing a child, bullying your own kid, harassing them, there is child services for that. We shouldn't be literally dismantling the parent-child relationship because there is crazy hypotheticals you can bring up, in which case a child could get harmed. By that standard, we basically should just give the kids over to the state because, hey, well, a parent could do something at any given time, so why not just have the teachers do it? But then you think, well, once a teacher does something to a child, they're bullying a child, they abuse a child, they do something, well, should children not be able to go to school? Obviously not. That's foolish, and we shouldn't be operating based on these just kind of fringe hypotheticals that because something could happen, there should be more government protections and there should be fewer liberties for families. Completely ridiculous. But I want to keep going through this article from PressProgress because it is absolutely a hoot. I will include my article I did on PressProgress exposing how far left they are. Like, they're not normal people. I'm not saying that they're just progressives. They're openly communists. They're okay with violence. They're okay with Antifa. They're the type of people who want to defund the police. These are not anyone who anyone would see as a reasonable figure to be commenting on things that Pierre Poilievre says. But going down, they just talk about who does all the stuff and who was commenting on it. And the Western Standard took it, and their spokesperson talked to PressProgress. But down here, they say Tyler Boyce, executive director of Enchant Network, Canada's largest network for 2S LGBTQ plus organization, that he's worried about the impact of Poilievre's divisive rhetoric on children in Canadian schools. What's going to happen? What's going to happen? Do you have a data point about how the parental rights movement has harmed anyone yet? Do you? Or is it just hypotheticals? Well, this divisive rhetoric could do something to a kid. What? You have to name it, or it's just random words. I could throw out random words every single time. Like I oppose bike lanes, obviously, for like normal reasons. But if we were to start to throw out hypotheticals about bike lanes could help thieves who ride bikes get away faster because they have an open area to get onto the road and away from the store they just robbed. Maybe that also is not an argument against bike lanes. That's a fringe, weird hypothetical of some random scenario you constructed to say something's bad. Again, I will clarify, I do not like bike lanes at all. I think that is just a way of trying to force people to stop driving their vehicles, and it's just government engineering against the way people want to live their lives. But whenever I criticize a progressive plan, I don't bring up some 1 in a million chance of something bad happening to say why you shouldn't have it. It has to be a straightforward reason that on the most common scenario, what's the negative outcome? The common scenario is what is proves something is not good. If the common scenario is likely to lead to something bad, then it might be a bad policy. It might be a bad idea. But if you have to invent a strange, crazy scenario in order to argue against something, you're just arguing in favor of it at that point, basically saying, I can't really point out anything. But just get back to the article. Sorry for bouncing around, guys. And he said, Pierre Poilievre's divisive rhetoric puts children and youth in danger. What danger? what danger? Like, all youth deserve respect and freedom to be who they are. And that's why the radical conservative attempt to roll back inclusive education guidelines is unacceptable. And it's like, okay, one, what danger? And when they say stuff like that they're somehow like trying to like violate a child's right to be who they are. Well, why? And this is the thing that's concerning a lot of parents. Why is it that so recently so many children are saying that I'm non-binary or I'm the opposite gender? No one wants to no one wants to beat up on these kids or harass them or whatever. They're children. Everyone's inherently nice to children. The problem that parents have is that, well, is it that the specific teacher is suggesting things to my kid and they're absorbing it? Because children are very susceptible to suggestions, just how children are. So when children are not being allowed to or when there's lack of transparency on sort of how your child acts in the classroom and what the lesson plans of the teacher are, that's concerning parents because they're wondering if, because of the very left-wing ideology of a teacher, they're suggesting things to a child and that the child is absorbing it, even though they're not identifying as who they really are. They're identifying as interesting things that the professor, or not the professor, but the teacher is suggesting that you could be. Oh, you could be an opposite gender. And children love unique experiences. So when you suggest some unique identity that a child could be, there's a chance that they might identify as it simply because it's interesting to a child, and children are very curious. It's just like if you had a super, super far right teacher or whatever, you would probably not want them teaching if they're going to be teaching anarcho-capitalism to the children. That's not really something the teacher should be doing. That's a personal thing for you, that it's not needed for a child who's in third grade who should be learning reading, writing, and arithmetic. It's fairly dangerous to actually be giving these incredibly high concept academic concepts to children who cannot understand them and can also not detect guile from the person that's teaching them to understand that this person just trying to get me onto their ideological train, or are they legitimately having some sort of a concern for me? Because frankly, a lot of the gender ideologues, and this is why parents oppose them, it's not that they're trying to be nice to children and see what they identify as and kind of be understanding. It's that they actively want children in their class to be trans. There's videos from people places like Libs of TikTok showing this, that basically teachers favor those children, and they very much do this thing where they put very poured on attention to a child who's not going to identify as a standard gender. And that is obviously a very, very big incentive for a child to sort of act that way at school to get attention from a teacher, knowing that the parents can't do anything about it because they're not needing to be advised at all about this type of stuff. But another thing that PressProgress did is that I don't need to bring this up, but they had another story, a follow-up from this, because again, it's all about creating false momentum behind the story. They say Richmond Hill deputy mayor apologizes for cheering on Pierre Poilievre's homophobic and transphobic speech. Did they prove it was homophobic and transphobic? Nah. PressProgress just in their former article, through their expert, labeled it transphobic and homophobic. So now that's part of the narrative, that he did give a transphobic and homophobic speech. Did he? No, he actually didn't. But now they've basically gotten this weakling from Richmond Hill, the deputy mayor, to say, oh, I apologize for all the people approving of what Pierre Poilievre said because it was transphobic and homophobic, because PressProgress put pressure on me to say it was. This is a false narrative. And again, I guarantee in a week's time, you'll have the Toronto Star, the CBC, Global, CTV, they'll have op-eds out there talking about how bad Pierre Poilievre is for trans kids, and he's coming after them, and he's going to put people in danger. It's complete nonsense, but this is how you launder a story. I'm going to go back from the beginning again. Sorry if I'm repeating myself, but you have a fringe left-wing organization like PressProgress or Anti-Hate put out a couple of articles about a certain subject. They quote curated experts who will always say that the conservatives radical. They're always going to say that whatever they said was hateful. And by doing that, by writing a couple articles and then ginning up a little outrage on social media, not enough that it actually amounts to anything, that it then gives the CBC license to come over and say, oh, well, look, there's something going on here. Well, we have to cover it. There's a little bit of outrage out there. And they'll cover it from the neutral perspective, where they won't say that Pierre Poilievre is transphobic and homophobic. They'll just say that people are saying that he's transphobic and homophobic, and they'll quote the same expert, quote unquote, that PressProgress used. And then after covering it a couple of times by just saying that there's outrage out there, eventually they'll have an op-ed writer say Pierre Poilievre's dangerous because look at all this coverage of things that people are saying are are deeply dangerous. And by and then the article that's supposedly supposed to be neutral again after that op-ed will just say dangerous rhetoric, that Pierre Poilievre is using dangerous rhetoric, and the narrative will just become he's using dangerous transphobic rhetoric, even though that's just something that 5 idiots online said who represent 20% of the population who opposes parental rights. And even then, I think half the people who oppose parental rights just don't know what it means, and they bought the narrative that it's somehow a big dog whistle to, like, the far right wing and whatever. Anyways, that's it for me today. I just want to quickly plug the fact that I'm running for the Calgary Signal Hill Conservative Party nomination. If you live out in this riding, make sure to buy a Conservative Party membership and sign up in my website in the description below. And also, I still have my legal fundraiser going on for my law case against this billionaire. I'm in a defamation defense case. We're winning, from my opinion. It's been going very well. And if you can throw in $5, $50, $100 into that thing, it really helps me out. You don't have to. Just liking and sharing and subscribing to the channel really helps me out too. And other than that, I hope everyone has a fantastic day and they don't mind me rambling for this long in my videos.